All right, today we are diving deep into the fuel that built the American West. We're going to explore the gritty, the ingenious, and the totally misunderstood breakfasts that cowboys were actually eating out on the trail. Listen to this. This quote from an old trail boss, that's not just some colorful poetry. That's a checklist. It's a list of requirements for the camp cook. The coffee literally had to be that strong, and the biscuits had to be tough enough to survive bouncing around in a saddlebag all day. It just perfectly captures the hard reality of a meal that had to power a man through a 15-hour day of brutal work. So when you hear about this food, your first thought is probably heart attack on a plate, right? But here's the central paradox, the whole reason we're talking about this today. That diet, absolutely loaded with fat, salt, and carbs, wasn't just okay for these guys, it was perfectly engineered high-performance fuel for the job they had to do. Now, to really get the food, you have to understand where it was made. You have to understand the kitchen. And let me tell you, the chuck wagon was so much more than just a pantry on wheels. It was its own self-contained world, and it operated under some very, very strict rules. The guy in charge of this whole operation was the camp cook, or cookie, as they called him. And this guy was basically a genius, but a genius born out of pure necessity. I mean, think about his code. Extreme thrift, absolutely zero waste. Last night's leftovers were the foundation for this morning's breakfast. He had very few ingredients to work with, so every single thing had to be packed with calories, tough enough to survive the trail, and portable enough that you could eat it on horseback if you had to. So, with that in mind, let's get to the good stuff. We're going to count down some of the most surprising, totally forgotten feats of culinary genius that came straight out of that chuck wagon. And you'll see, these aren't just recipes, they are masterclasses in resourcefulness. Kicking us off, let's talk about a breakfast staple that was only possible because of a brilliant little bit of trailside chemistry. Here's a puzzle for you. How do you make a light, fluffy buttermilk biscuit when you're hundreds of miles from the nearest dairy cow? Well, you fake it. Or more accurately, you use a little science. Cookie would just add a splash of cider vinegar into regular sweet milk. You let it sit for a couple of minutes, the acid curdles the milk, and boom, you have a perfect buttermilk substitute. That acid then reacts with the baking soda in the dough and gives the biscuits this incredible, tall, flaky rise. You know, a chemist would call it acid-based leavening. Cookie just called it Tuesday. All right, our next breakfast was about way more than just calories. This was a critical tool for managing the mood and the morale of the entire outfit. A good cook knew that sometimes the most important ingredient you have is just a little bit of joy. And that joy often came in the form of something they called bear sign. That's chuck wagon slang for donuts. Fresh, hot, deep-fried donuts. And I'm not kidding, they say that when the cook announced he was making a batch, grown men would just fall silent. These weren't just a treat, they were practically currency. I mean, the value they placed on a simple donut was just incredible. You can read old trail diaries where cowboys would trade a whole month's worth of their tobacco allowance for just one extra donut. Foremen actually used them as performance bonuses. In fact, you could often judge the quality of a whole cattle outfit by how often its cook made bear sign. Okay, let's move on to a breakfast food that was so good, so satisfying, that the United States Army actually banned it from its official rations. No joke. Back in 1905, the Army Quartermaster General officially declared corn dodgers to be, and I'm quoting here, too rich and indulgent for soldiers. You can just imagine the cowboys, who lived on these things, hearing that and just laughing their heads off. What the Army considered a luxury, the cowboy considered essential. So what were they? Well, corn dodgers were these really dense little biscuits made from cornmeal, salt, boiling water, and a very generous amount of bacon grease. They were hard on the outside, soft in the middle, and a cowboy could stuff a half dozen in his saddlebag and they'd last for days. They were, without a doubt, the original all-natural energy bar. This next one is just fascinating. It's a genuine superfood borrowed from Plains Indian traditions that just a few years ago was put to the test against modern nutritional science, and it won. It's called pemmican. The recipe is incredibly simple. It's just dried, pounded meat, like buffalo or beef jerky, mixed with rendered fat. That's it. What you get is a calorie-dense, nutrient-rich brick that can keep for years without any refrigeration. A single pound of this stuff packs an unbelievable 3,500 calories. For breakfast, Cookie would just shave some off and fry it up in bacon drippings. So just how powerful is it? Well, in 2019, a study at the University of Utah put pemmican head-to-head against modern sports energy gels. On endurance runs that lasted over 6 hours, the group that was fueled by the fat and protein in pemmican consistently outperformed the group that was using the sugary gels. It's amazing. Cowboys knew this in the 1840s, and science needed a research grant to rediscover it. And that brings us to our number one spot, the big one. This isn't just a meal, folks. This is the foundational culinary engine that drove American westward expansion. This is the holy trinity of cowboy breakfast. And it is as simple and as perfect as it sounds. Bacon, beans, and a biscuit. The cook would fry up some thick-cut bacon, then he'd spoon leftover pinto beans directly into that hot grease, and then he'd hand you a fresh biscuit to mop up every last drop of that smoky, salty, pork-infused flavor. And here is why it was so perfect. It was a complete nutritional package. You had long-burning energy from the bacon fat, you had muscle-building protein from the pork and the beans, you had quick-burning carbs from the biscuit and the beans, and crucially, you had all that salt to replace everything they were losing through sweat. And they needed every single calorie. A cowboy on a trail drive could burn up to 8,000 calories in a single day. Suddenly, that plate of bacon grease and beans doesn't seem so indulgent, does it? It seems like a bare necessity. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the point? Well, it's really about the lost wisdom of practical, purpose-built nutrition. This food wasn't inherently unhealthy. It was a perfect match for the lifestyle it supported. The problem isn't the bacon and beans. The problem is eating bacon and beans and then going to sit at a desk for 8 hours. This was food as fuel, in its purest, most honest form. And that really sums it all up. There's this practical, common-sense wisdom here that we've kind of traded away for convenience. And let's be honest, for options that are often a lot less nutritious. So I'll leave you with a final thought, maybe a bit of a challenge. This weekend, why not try making one of these? Try the vinegar biscuits or the bear sign donuts. Which one would you choose to get a taste of this piece of forgotten culinary history?